Forgotten promises. The downtown skyline glittered behind Nathan Wilson as he stood at the window of his corner office. 40 floors up, the city looked like a circuit board, organized, logical, each light representing a connection in the vast network he had helped build. Wilson Tech had transformed from a garage startup to a billion-dollar company in just 7 years. And at 35, Nathan had everything he'd ever wanted. Almost everything. "Mr. Wilson, the board is waiting." His assistant Diane's voice pulled him back to reality. "Tell them 5 minutes," Nathan replied, not turning around. His reflection in the glass showed a man he barely recognized. Designer suit, artfully styled hair, the confident posture of success. Yet his eyes held something hollow. His phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Doctor says everything's fine. 24 weeks now. Wish you could have been there." Nathan sighed, typing a quick, "Great news. Sorry about today. Big meeting." He slipped the phone into his pocket without waiting for a response. Victoria had understood his drive once. When they'd met at Stanford, she'd been the brilliant biology student with dreams of research that would change the world. They'd fallen in love over late-night study sessions and ambitious conversations about their future. 7 years of marriage later, she'd put her career on hold for his, and now for the baby, their first child, growing inside her while he grew increasingly absent. The boardroom fell silent when Nathan entered. 8 faces looked up expectantly, including Sophia Reynolds, the marketing consultant he'd hired 3 months ago. Dark-haired and sharp-eyed, she smiled at him with a confidence that matched his own. "Let's talk about the London expansion," Nathan began, sliding easily into the role everyone expected of him. 2 hours later, as executives filed out, Sophia lingered. "That was impressive," she said, gathering her papers. "The way you handled Preston's concerns about the timeline. Preston worries too much. The risk is worth the reward." "Speaking of risks," Sophia said, her voice dropping slightly, "I've been working on some projections I think you should see. Not quite ready for. The whole board." "My office? 7 tonight?" Nathan suggested. "Perfect. I'll bring dinner." Nathan returned to his office, guilt nudging at his conscience. He should go home early for once. Victoria had been dealing with morning sickness for weeks, though she rarely complained. Their sprawling suburban house, a monument to his success, must feel especially empty these days. He called her. "How are you feeling?" "Better now," Victoria answered, her voice gentle despite the underlying fatigue. "The doctor says the baby's developing perfectly. She printed some new ultrasound pictures. You can actually see little fingers now." "That's amazing," Nathan said, feeling the distance between them stretch across the phone line. "Listen, I need to finish some things here. Don't wait up." The silence lasted 3 beats too long. "You promised we'd talk about the nursery designs tonight." "Tomorrow, I promise." Another promise he wasn't sure he'd keep. When Sophia arrived that evening with Thai food and ambitious marketing strategies, Nathan found himself relaxing for the first time all day. She understood the language of business, of ambition. She laughed at his jokes and challenged his thinking in ways that felt invigorating rather than exhausting. "You're different from most CEOs I've worked with," Sophia said, sitting closer than strictly necessary as they reviewed projections on his tablet. "You still have the hunger. Most get comfortable once they reach your level." "Comfortable isn't in my vocabulary," Nathan replied. "I've noticed." Her eyes held his for a moment too long. "That's what makes you exceptional." At home, Victoria sat alone at their dining table, the nursery color swatches spread out beside untouched dinner plates. She placed her hand on her growing belly, feeling a small kick, a reminder that whatever happened, she wasn't truly alone anymore. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11. Victoria gathered the swatches, turned out the lights, and headed upstairs, leaving a single lamp on in the foyer. She still did this every night, despite knowing better. A light to guide him home, even as she felt him slipping further away with each passing day. Glass Castle's Victoria Wilson stood in her kitchen, one hand resting on the marble countertop, the other on her growing belly. The sprawling home that had once felt like an achievement now seemed to echo with emptiness. At 28 weeks pregnant, the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the hollow feeling that had taken residence in her chest. The notification light on her tablet blinked. Another email from Nathan. Need to extend the London trip. We'll be gone 2 weeks instead of 1. Sophia's coming along to finalize the marketing rollout. Victoria's fingers trembled slightly as she set the tablet down. Sophia Reynolds. The name had become increasingly frequent in Nathan's conversations over the past few months. Always professional explanations, always reasonable contexts. Yet something in Victoria's intuition flickered like a warning light. "You're being paranoid," she whispered to herself, moving to the refrigerator to prepare a meal she'd likely eat alone. Again. The baby kicked, a solid thump against her ribs that made her smile despite everything. "At least you're keeping me." "Company. Little one." Her phone rang. Olivia, her younger sister, and the only person who still called, instead of texting. "How's my favorite mama to be?" Olivia's cheerful voice filled the kitchen. Growing by the minute, Victoria replied, trying to match her sister's brightness. "The doctor says everything's perfect." "And how's the absentee father?" The question came with Olivia's characteristic directness. Victoria hesitated. "Busy. London expansion now. 2 weeks. With that marketing woman again? Liv, don't start. I'm not starting anything. You are ending something by pretending nothing's wrong." After they hung up, Victoria found herself in Nathan's home office, a room she rarely entered. She wasn't looking for anything, she told herself. Just confirming that her fears were irrational. The receipt she found in his desk drawer told a different story. A jewelry store in the financial district. An emerald pendant. Victoria's birthstone was sapphire, not emerald. The date marked 3 weeks ago, the amount staggering even by Nathan's standards. No gift had appeared for her. Her hands moved mechanically through his drawers, finding hotel confirmations for suites with ocean views in places she'd never been invited to, text messages accidentally synced to his desktop that spoke in a shorthand, of intimacy she recognized from the early days of their own relationship. In London, Nathan stood at another window in another high-rise, watching the Thames wind through the ancient city. Wilson Tech's European headquarters would occupy 3 floors of this building by year's end. He should have felt triumphant. "Penny for your thoughts," Sophia said, stepping beside him. She wore a dress that caught the light, her perfume subtle, but present in the space between them. "Just thinking about scale. How small everything looks from up here?" Sophia laughed. "Always the visionary. That's why this will work." She brushed her hand against his, a gesture that had become familiar in the past weeks. The resort confirmation came through. Maldives, private villa, completely off the grid. Just what you need after this deal closes. Nathan felt a flicker of something. Not quite guilt, but awareness. He was building one life while dismantling another. Victoria would be 32 weeks by then. The doctors had mentioned potential complications due to her slightly elevated blood pressure. "I should call home," he said, more to himself than to Sophia. "Of course," she replied, her smile never wavering. "Family first, right? That's what makes you so admirable." The pause before the last word carried volumes. When Victoria didn't answer his call, Nathan felt relief mingled with concern. He left a message about meetings and time differences, promises to talk tomorrow. The lies came easier now, flowing into the growing space between them. Back in their suburban mansion, Victoria sat surrounded by evidence of her husband's betrayal. Her academic training as a researcher now focused on cataloging the systematic dismantling of her marriage. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. "I know," she whispered, wiping away tears she'd promised herself she wouldn't shed. "We deserve better than this. Both of us." She gathered the papers, receipts, confirmations, messages, and placed them neatly in a folder. Then she called Olivia back. "I need a favor," Victoria said, her voice steadier than it had been in months. "And I need a place to stay, just for a while." "I'm already making up the guest room," Olivia replied without hesitation. "And Vic, I'm proud of you." Victoria looked around at the perfect house, built on an increasingly imperfect foundation. Glass castles, she thought. Beautiful, but dangerous when they shatter. Fractured reflections. The Maldivian sun cast diamond patterns across turquoise water as Nathan stretched on the private deck of their ocean villa. 5 days into their business retreat, and he'd almost forgotten the weight of expectations that usually sat on his shoulders. "Coffee?" Sophia emerged from the villa wearing his shirt and not much else, her dark hair tousled from sleep. "Perfect," he replied, taking the offered cup. "Have I mentioned this was the best idea you've ever had? Only about a dozen times." She settled into the lounger beside him. "Though I can't take full credit. You were the one brave enough to actually do it." Brave. The word struck Nathan as wrong somehow. Was it bravery to escape or cowardice? He pushed the thought away, focusing instead on Sophia's hand tracing patterns on his arm. The London team emailed. "They need decisions on the staffing structure," she said. "Not today." Nathan set his coffee down. "Today we're still off the grid." Sophia smiled. "That's why this works between us. You understand balance in a way Victoria never could." The mention of his wife's name created a ripple in his carefully constructed piece. Victoria, who would be nearing her 3rd trimester now. Victoria, who had stopped calling after he'd extended his London trip without discussion. Victoria, who had once known him better than anyone. "Let's snorkel to the reef," Nathan suggested, changing the subject. The concierge mentioned sea turtles near the drop-off. Meanwhile, in Olivia's modest but warm apartment, Victoria sat on a cushioned window seat, watching rain trace patterns down the glass. 3 weeks had passed since she'd left the mansion, taking only what she needed. Nathan still didn't know. His rare calls went to voicemail. His texts received minimal responses. Let him think she was finally accepting his absence. Let him enjoy his freedom a little longer. "Tea's ready," Olivia announced, setting a steaming mug beside her sister. "Marcus is coming by later with those prenatal vitamins you mentioned. He found them at that health store near the hospital." Victoria smiled gratefully. "He doesn't need to keep doing these things for us." "Try telling him that." Olivia sat opposite her. "Besides, he's been half in love with you since your undergrad days. Just because you chose Nathan—" "Don't," Victoria interrupted gently. "That was a different lifetime." Marcus Chen had indeed been part of Victoria's life before Nathan, a brilliant research partner who'd made his feelings clear just weeks after she'd already fallen for Nathan's charismatic ambition. They'd maintained a friendship over the years, even as Marcus established himself as one of the country's leading pediatric researchers. When he arrived that evening, rain-spattered and bearing not just vitamins, but a selection of herbal teas, known to ease pregnancy discomfort, Victoria felt a familiar warmth in his presence. "Your blood pressure readings look better," Marcus noted as he checked the home monitoring kit he'd brought her. "The reduced stress is helping." "Having conversations with actual humans helps," Victoria replied. "Turns out pregnant women don't thrive in isolation." Marcus's eyes, kind behind his glasses, held hers for a moment. "I've been meaning to ask. Have you told him where you are?" Victoria shook her head. "Not yet, but I've started documenting everything for the lawyer." "Lawyer?" Marcus repeated quietly. So you've decided? I'm giving my child a life without lies as the foundation. Victoria's hand rested protectively over her belly. If Nathan wants to be part of that life, he'll have to rebuild from the ground up. In the Maldives, Nathan woke in the middle of the night, disoriented. Sophia slept peacefully beside him, but something had jolted him from sleep, a dream he couldn't quite remember, filled with a sense of loss. He reached for his phone, calculating the time difference. Victoria would be awake now. He should call, check in. The prenatal appointments would be more frequent at this stage. When the call connected, it went straight to voicemail. Again. Victoria, it's me. Just checking in. Hope everything's good with the baby and all. I'll be back next week. We should talk. As he set the phone down, Nathan noticed an email notification. His house security system, alerting him that the main alarm hadn't been set for 20 consecutive days. Hollow victory. The Wilson Tech London office launched with the kind of elegant reception that business magazines would feature for months to come. Nathan, impeccable in a tailored suit, moved through the crowd of investors and tech journalists. With practiced ease, Sophia coordinating perfectly at his side. The European market is just the beginning, he told a cluster of potential partners. We're looking at Asia-Pacific expansion by third quarter next year. Later, as the celebration continued, Nathan slipped away to a quiet conference room and called his home number again. No answer. He tried Victoria's cell. Voicemail immediately. A cold feeling had been growing in his stomach for days. After returning from the Maldives, he'd gone straight to London for the launch. 3 weeks had passed since he'd had an actual conversation with his wife. The security system notifications continued. The house cleaners reported through their service app that Mrs. Wilson's instructions were to only maintain certain rooms. There you are, Sophia said, appearing in the doorway. The Bloomberg reporter is asking for one more statement about market projections. Nathan nodded, putting his phone away. I'll be right there. Everything okay? She asked, her hand sliding up his arm in a gesture that had once felt exciting but now seemed somehow performative. Victoria's not answering. She hasn't been answering for weeks. Sophia's expression shifted subtly. She's probably just resting. Pregnancy is exhausting from what I hear. I'm going home tomorrow, Nathan said suddenly. First flight. But we have the Berlin meetings. Reschedule them. Nathan moved past her toward the door. Something's wrong. Nathan. Sophia's voice hardened slightly. We've worked too hard to build this momentum. The team needs you present. Victoria has doctors, friends, whatever she needs. He turned back, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Beautiful, ambitious, strategic Sophia, who had appeared in his life at exactly the moment he was most vulnerable to flattery and escape. That's the problem, he said quietly. I don't actually know what she needs. I haven't for a long time. The next morning, Nathan's key turned in the lock of his front door. The house was silent in a way that felt different from the usual emptiness. He called Victoria's name, moving from room to room with increasing urgency. In their bedroom, drawers stood partially empty. In what would have been the nursery, boxes of unassembled furniture remained where they'd been delivered months ago. No paint on the walls, no curtains on the windows, just emptiness and possibility, unrealized. Nathan sank onto the edge of their bed, noticing for the first time an envelope on his pillow. Inside, he found not divorce papers as he'd feared, but a single note in Victoria's precise handwriting. When you're ready to see me, really see me, I'll be at Olivia's. The baby and I deserve more than being convenient additions to your life. Beneath, it lay the jewelry receipt he'd forgotten about, the hotel confirmations, the text messages, all the evidence of his betrayal, meticulously gathered. Victoria had always been thorough in her research. 3 hours later, Nathan stood outside Olivia's apartment building in the light rain, flowers in hand, rehearsed apologies dying on his lips as the door opened. Marcus Chen stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to something harder when he recognized Nathan. "She doesn't want to see you," Marcus said simply. "You don't speak for my wife," Nathan replied, tension building in his chest. "No, but I've been here for her while you've been elsewhere." Marcus didn't step aside. "Victoria's blood pressure spiked dangerously last week. The doctor has ordered complete rest, minimal stress. You are currently a stress factor." Nathan's grip tightened on the flowers. "I need to explain." "Explain what? Your affair? Your abandoned responsibilities? The fact that you haven't attended a single prenatal appointment in months?" Marcus's voice remained clinical, which somehow made it worse. "Victoria knows everything she needs to know. When she's ready to talk to you, she'll call." As the door closed, Nathan stood frozen, the magnitude of what he'd dismantled finally hitting him with full force. The rain intensified, soaking through his expensive coat. His phone buzzed. Sophia, with questions about the Berlin rescheduling. He silenced it without responding, finally understanding what success had cost him. Redemption's price autumn leaves swirled across the hospital parking lot as Nathan sat in his car, gathering courage. Inside his jacket pocket, a small velvet box held not jewelry, but a flash drive, months of therapy sessions, journal entries, and a detailed plan for rebuilding trust. Beside him on the passenger seat lay the finalized divorce papers Victoria had sent 3 weeks ago, unsigned. 4 months had passed since his return from London. 4 months of unanswered calls that gradually gave way to brief formal text exchanges. 4 months of living alone in the too-large house, haunted by what he'd thrown away. Victoria had agreed to meet him today, the first face-to-face conversation since his return. Their daughter had been born 2 weeks earlier, slightly premature, but healthy. Eleanor Olivia Wilson, named for Victoria's grandmother and sister. Nathan had seen her only in the single photo Victoria had sent. Tiny features, eyes closed, perfect. The hospital room was quiet when he entered, autumn sunlight filtering through half-drawn blinds. Victoria sat in a rocking chair by the window, their daughter cradled against her chest. She looked up when the door opened, her expression guarded but not hostile. "You came," she said simply. "Thank you for letting me." Nathan remained near the door, uncertain of his welcome. "How is she?" Growing stronger every day. A hint of pride softened Victoria's voice. "The doctors say we can take her home tomorrow." Home. The word hung between them, its meaning no longer clear. Nathan moved closer, stopping a respectful distance. Away. "May I see her?" Victoria nodded, adjusting the blanket to reveal their daughter's face. Eleanor's eyes were open now, dark blue and unfocused, tiny fingers curled against her cheek. "She has your chin," Victoria said quietly. Nathan felt something break open inside him, love and regret so intertwined he couldn't separate them. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Victoria, Don't," she interrupted gently. "Not yet." She gestured to the chair opposite hers. "Sit. There's something I need to say first." Nathan sat, placing the unsigned divorce papers on the small table. Between them. "I didn't sign them," he said. "I noticed." Victoria's gaze was steady, assessing. She looked different, stronger somehow. The softness of pregnancy replaced by a new certainty in her posture. "Why not?" "Because ending our marriage would be the second biggest mistake of my life. The first was betraying it in the first place." Nathan leaned forward. "I've spent 4 months in intensive therapy, learning to understand what I did and why. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. I'm asking for a chance to try." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, looking down at their daughter. When I left our house, I wasn't just leaving a place. I was leaving a version of myself, the woman who accepted crumbs of attention and called it a marriage. She met his eyes again. That woman isn't coming back, Nathan. Ever. I wouldn't want her to, he replied. I fell in love with a brilliant, confident researcher who knew her worth. I just forgot to keep seeing her. A nurse entered with medication for Victoria, pausing when she sensed the tension in the room. Everything okay, Mrs. Wilson? Everything's fine, Judy, Victoria assured her. This is Eleanor's father. The nurse smiled professionally before leaving them alone again. Sophia contacted me, Victoria said once the door closed. Did you know that? Nathan's shock must have shown on his face. She wanted to clear the air before leaving for Singapore. Told me your relationship was just physical, nothing that should threaten my position. Victoria's laugh held no humor. As if my objection was to losing status rather than having my trust violated. I ended things the day I came back from London, Nathan said. Whatever she told you doesn't matter, Victoria finished for him. None of it matters except for one thing. She looked down at Eleanor, then back at Nathan. What kind of parents do we want to be? What example do we set? Nathan reached for the velvet box in his pocket, placing it beside the divorce papers. This is everything I've been working on. My therapy journal. Plans for co-parenting whether we stay married or not. Financial arrangements that prioritize Eleanor's future and your research career. He hesitated. And a list of every lie I told, every mistake I made, with no excuses. Victoria looked at the box but didn't reach for it. Instead, she stood carefully, cradling Eleanor against her shoulder. Would you like to hold your daughter? She asked. The simplicity of the question brought tears to Nathan's eyes. More than anything. As Victoria placed Eleanor in his arms, the tiny weight of his daughter settled against his chest. Her eyes, unfocused but somehow knowing, looked up at him. Hello, Eleanor, he whispered. I'm your dad. Victoria watched them, her expression softening slightly. The papers remain unsigned for now, she said. We'll try family therapy. Weekly sessions, complete honesty. I've taken a research position at Stanford that starts in 3 months. My sister will help with childcare. You're going back to your work? Nathan asked, genuine pleasure in his voice. Victoria, that's wonderful. I never should have set it aside completely, she said. That was my mistake to fix. As Nathan held his daughter, feeling her tiny heartbeat against his own, he understood that redemption wouldn't come in grand gestures or single conversations. It would be built day by day, choice by choice, in the unglamorous work of showing up and being present. I don't know if I can ever trust you completely again, Victoria said, her honesty gentle but firm. But I'm willing to find out if we can build something new, for her sake, and maybe for ours. Outside the hospital window, autumn leaves continued. Their dance, letting go, falling, finding new ground. Nathan looked at his wife and daughter, understanding finally that true success had nothing to do with the empire he'd built and everything to do with the love he'd nearly lost. That's all I can ask for, he said. A chance to try.